Well, I think a scientist is someone who observes the things happen. How do the things change? For example, today my teacher went to his kitchen and made some Play-Doh with a liquid Play-Doh with with ingredients of food and like that. And I didn't know how did that made that. I enjoy see making the erosion experiment. And I remember when I went to the park to collect some dirt and rocks and like that. And when I got home with the rocks and everything, I made the mountain and then poured some water, and I observed the stream experiment.
Hello, I'm Antonia. I'm a first grader and I am from CND.
What have you most enjoyed about science this year?
The thing I most enjoyed about science this year is learning about birds.
Why have you enjoyed learning about birds?
Because I think it's pretty interesting to look at the beaks of the bird and thinking, what do they eat?
Wonderful. And why do you think it is the most important part about being a scientist?
About being a scientist is sharing your ideas with your friends or your mom and dad or your brother, so you can get better ideas and they can get better ideas too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Antonia.
All right, we've got one more while we get our last round of people in here. If you came in since the last time I said hello, please introduce yourself in the chat. And right now we're listening to some student testimonials about NGSS. If you've been listening so far, you've probably heard in general a theme of engagement and excitement, love for science, which is really great. And probably some NGSS themes, like the little girl that was just talking definitely mentioned structure and function in first grade language, which is also very cool to see how that comes through in student language. So we'll do one more and then we'll get started.
And that's for everyone. I want you to get inside this little thing. And it did, so that was my mission. And now, bye.
Nati, tell us a little bit about your process for that project. Like, how did you predict the motion of the marble?
I just, with one cardboard box, pasted it, and I had to predict where it was gonna, like, move. Like, here was the box, and it was going to move this way, so I had to put the box facing that way, where it go in the other box.
And did you get it right the first time?
No.
So you made some mistakes when you were making it?
Yeah, sometimes it was too thick, so the marble would come out. Sometimes it didn't get in, so I had to practice a lot, and with the other boxes it was even harder.
I imagine. Do you think that scientists make mistakes and learn from their mistakes?
Yeah.
All the time, right? That's a super important part of science.
All right, we hope you enjoyed those student testimonials. We're going to be purposefully weaving a lot of narratives through today from leaders, from teachers. You've already seen the students. It's really important for it to not just be, you know, the NGSS fan club, Heather, John, Mark, Paul, myself talking about how great this is, but really for other people to share that with us and get to tell you all about it. So I'm going to pass it over to Sonia for some intros.
Thank you, Brina. Hello, everybody. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us, science teachers and educational leaders from around our Tri-Association region. I'm Sonia Keller, the Executive Director for this association, and I'm very excited to be able to launch with you this partnership that has been made possible by the three teachers that are going to be leading and guiding us today. Brita McCarthy is the Assistant Director of Learning and Curriculum Development at the Columbus School in Medellin, Colombia. John Mark Flig is a middle school science teacher at Colegio Nueva Granada in Bogotá, Colombia. And Heather Rich is the elementary instructional coach at the American School Foundation in Monterrey, Mexico. In addition to that, we have our NGSS guru and phenomenal science teacher, Paul Andersen, with us today. So I just want to thank Paul. Paul was a little bit hard to get, so hope it did bring Paul our way, for which is one of the few things that we can be grateful for in terms of this pandemic. But because he had to cut back on his travel, he now is being able to spend a lot more time teaching online. So we're very lucky to have you. So thank you, teachers, and thank you, Paul and Laura, for making this possible. Back to you, Brita.
Apologies, everyone. I just realized you could hear my entry chime. So sorry about that. Heather, are you here?
Yes.
Awesome.
So I'm Heather Rich. I'm an instructional coach at the American School Foundation in Monterrey, as Sonia introduced. And I'm really grateful to be here with you all because we are starting a journey together in Tri-Association. NGSS truly is a partnership. It's a partnership of students, it's a partnership of teachers, and it's a partnership of admin. And so we're bringing two of those groups here today. And our purpose moving forward is to develop each other's capacity. We're gonna have different conferences per semester. And the hope is we'll be able to come together and be able to share what's working, develop and enhance what might need to change, and kind of move ourselves forward in helping kids reach that potential in those testimonials.
So as I mentioned, we are going to have some, sorry, getting a really bad echo.
Whoops.
Trying again. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to be trying to share narratives from lots of other people today. This is Hannah. She's a 4th grade teacher from my school, the Columbus School, and she's going to give us a little bit of inspiration for why we're here today.
Student perspective. I know oftentimes administrators and educators are looking at it from their point of view only, but really seeing it through the student's eyes was super helpful for me in changing my mind shift about what the learning will look like, what it'll feel like, what it'll sound like when it's happening in the classroom. And believe me, it's fantastic. One way that student learning looks different after implementing NGSS is that students are truly the centerpiece of the classroom and of the learning. There's lots of smiles, lots of laughter, lots of, strong thinking faces. But what's really special is they take ownership over the learning, and it's truly special to see that they're able to retain the knowledge that we're learning together and holding on to together, and that comes back later in the year. It's fun to see how something we learned in August is now coming back in March, and has been really helpful for them to be able to link those things on their own without me being, the needle to do that for them.
So one of the things that we love doing is bringing Paul. Paul is really good at inspiring us and having us act as students. So with Hannah's inspirational note, I hope that everybody takes advantage today. Really put yourself in the shoes of your students, see science through their eyes, because it really feels different with NGSS. What we're doing here is different than a lot of the ways that we learned science as students and the ways that we were possibly taught to teach science in university, if that even happened. So be prepared for some learning and some unlearning as you put yourself in the role of a student today.
Student perspective. I know oftentimes
we have one more message from Joe Stanzione, elementary principal from American School Foundation of Monterrey.
Student learning can and will look different with NGSS. It's going to look messy at times. There will be lots of questions from students about topics, and lots of questions from teachers too. As educators, we might not know all of the answers. How are we expected to know all of the answers in science? Learning will include data gathering, graphic organizers, lots of questions, as I mentioned, and plenty of evidence to support claims. After all, that is what science is. Mostly, classes will need to have wonder. We need to keep that alive the most.
What do you think, Paul? He could probably work with you and Laura.
Yeah, big fan. Yeah, Joe's in the audience too, so it's nice to have you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe, for that testimonial. Definitely important to have wonder and also to have questions and not necessarily feel like when you're teaching NGSS that you have to be the expert. So one of the biggest shifts is that just like your students, you want to be asking questions, you want to be modeling curiosity. It's not like the scientific method that you may have learned with back in the day, but it's a lot of those skills unpacked and you model those as a teacher. So you doing the question asking, the observing, showing how to use tools to collect data and to come to justifications and reasonings. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to John Mark to tell you a little bit more about what's happening next, because this is just one event in the NGSS partnership series.
Awesome, thank you, Britta. Hello, everyone. My name is John Mark. I'm a middle school science teacher down here in Bogota. As Heather mentioned earlier, this is kind of like the start of a multi-year partnership among schools within Tri-Association around NGSS. So first off, if you're like me, you'd heard of Tri-Association, but you probably haven't heard of your like specific region's educational association. So it's called Tri-Association because it's made of 3 associations. ASAMEX is the association for schools in Mexico. ASCA is the name of the association for schools in Central America. And ACAS is for schools in Colombia, Ecuador, and the Caribbean. Those of you in ACAS know that back in November, we hosted our first NGSS partnership conference in November 2020, just for the ACAS schools. Today in February, we have all regions present, and we're planning a second conference for April 2021 for schools in ASAMEX and ASCA. We'll share, so schools in Mexico and Central America. We'll share more information about that at the end of this session. But we'll be following up with you about that. And then in fall of 2021, we'll have another conference. We still haven't figured out all the details for it, but it will involve all 3 regions in the fall.
All right, so before Paul jumps in, we have 2 sessions running concurrently today. We're going to spend the first 40 minutes together, all acting as students with Paul. That's the 3D instruction, which 3D is referring to the 3D architecture of performance expectations in NGSS. And what we're going to be doing with Paul is deepening our instructional practices within those 3 dimensions of NGSS. And then after that, we're going to be using self-selected breakout rooms for leaders and admin. So if you're an instructional coach, a curriculum coordinator, principal, vice principal, head of school, and so on, or someone that supports major structural changes in your school around NGSS, you might want to go there too. We're going to be using that I can statement of I can support NGSS implementation in my school's science program. And with that, it is now time for Paul.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Britta, and thanks for all of you for coming. It's wonderful to see a bunch of faces, some familiar faces and a bunch of new faces. I saw some people shouting out Bozeman Science, which will mean a lot to some of you, but nothing to other people. So just brief intro, I'm Paul Andersen. I was a science teacher for 20 years. I have a YouTube channel called Bozeman Science where I put videos up. But for the last 7 years, I've been working with schools as they implement NGSS. I've been around the world working with schools trying to get something like this going in different areas in Asia and Europe. And so like kudos to Britta, John Mark, Heather for actually getting this going and starting a partnership. At the beginning, it's always kind of hard, but because we're all in different places. And so I just want to start by doing some teaching. I think what makes NGSS powerful is it is just a paradigm shift. And I don't like to throw that word around. It's a literal paradigm shift in the way that you will start teaching science, but it does The wonderful thing about it, I think, was highlighted in those testimonials. You get to see how amazing your kids are. And that's the best part of this. So what I'm going to try to do is take you through some learning today. Today, you're not here to be a teacher. Just sit back, relax, and try to be a learner today. And I would say that's a big part of being part of the partnership. Like, you're here to learn from other people. And so just like, don't worry, I'm in charge of the Zoom today. We are, and so it's going to be fine. So if we start with some slides, let me start with that. Britta, does this show up for you? Okay, are you seeing that? Awesome, thank you. So first of all, the wonder of science is where I put all my work now. And so I think John and Mark and I will have the teacher session a little bit later, and we're going to go through a lot of resources that are there that you can use. But I want to highlight my wife, Laura Andersen. She's on here as well. And we really are a partnership. You don't see a lot of the work that she does, but it is like half of the work that gets done is done by Laura. I wanted to start with like the biggest pivot in the way you'll teach science with NGSS. And I think just reflect on the way you've taught in the past, and like Britta said, your own classes. I think the old school way of teaching science is we would always start with the teacher giving an explanation of the science you're going to learn. And then after that, there was a little bit of exploration. Maybe you did a lab, or if you're in elementary, you're doing a kit or some science kit. But it's always explanation first, exploration second. The biggest pivot in NGSS is we want the kids exploring first. There's still going to be an explanation. They're still going to understand the science that we think is important. They're just not going to do it first. We're going to start with kids exploring, and then explanation comes second. Now, sometimes you'll see the standards and it will say construct an explanation, and teachers get confused. They think that's when they come in and they explain. The word explanation is the students explaining. So that second part, we want the students in a video saying like, this is what I've learned about the science, or this is what I've made sense of using some kind of an investigation. And so let me get to the quick nuts and bolts, or NGSS 101, but we'll dig in much deeper in subsequent workshops. It's important for you to understand what the dimensions are. Old school standards just used to focus on the content, and probably too much content, and didn't highlight the most important content. So with NGSS, there are 3 dimensions, and each of those are equal in importance. Content is no more important than the practices, and I'll go through what those dimensions are. If we start with the first one, these are the big ideas that you'll teach with NGSS. So in these larger areas of life, physical, and earth science, you're going to cover these big areas, and you'll do it vertically. In K through 2, in 3 through 5, in middle school and high school. You can see one addition in the upper right is engineering is a big part of the NGSS, and that's super important as well. I'm about to do a lesson with you, and I'm not going to tell you what we're going to learn. Because if I tell you what we're going to learn, that really like defeats the purpose. You're not a scientist anymore. But the orange in the NGSS will always be the content. It's what the kids are going to have to know. The next bit are the practices, science and engineering practices. Those will always be color-coded blue, and that's what the students will do. And so if you're teaching NGSS every day in class, the students should be doing 1 or more of these practices. Today in our little sample lesson, you're going to be focused on number 1, getting better at asking scientific questions, and then number 2, starting to do some modeling. And I would encourage schools, these are the best place to start with your students. Have them wonder and have them tell you what they're thinking and show what they're thinking. And then when it comes to the cross-cutting concepts, I think these are sometimes the most underutilized, but also maybe the most important dimension of the NGSS. This is how we think about the science that we're doing. So right now, you could imagine this partnership, Britta, is a system. And I would imagine you want that system operating correctly. And so the relationships between all the parts of the system will be really, really important. The 2 that we'll focus on, we'll start asking questions around patterns to begin with, but then we're going to dig into system models and understanding how to show what you're thinking in relation to a system. I was really happy when Joe talked about the wonder, because this is a motto that I've had for quite a while. My motto when it comes to teaching science is don't kill the wonder. Like if I could say one thing when you're teaching science, the wonder is a look you make when you don't understand how something works. There's an emoji for it now, but let me show you what it looks like. It looks like that. The wonder is when you're thinking about something and you turn your eyes sideways and you're just kind of scratching your chin and you don't really know what's going on. That's where we want our kids. We want them wondering and then helping them to answer the questions that they have. That's the goal of NGSS. And so if we think about the 3 dimensions together, old school way of teaching, we would just focus on the orange in the middle. What are the students going to learn? The way they should learn it now is through phenomena. So this is a new word that you'll come to in the NGSS, but it's not new to scientists. This is what scientists have been doing for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years, is identifying something in the world that they don't understand and then trying to figure it out. So they learn the science by understanding phenomena, and that will be the center. Every day in class, the kids will be either trying to figure out a phenomena or coming up with some solution to a problem. And these other dimensions simply help them. They help them understand the phenomena, but they're equal in importance. What I've learned over especially the last 2 or 3 years, mostly from elementary teachers, is that you have to build little mini lessons around these cross-cutting concepts and practices to teach them the skills so they can apply it into the phenomena. So you still will do direct instruction. Your direct instruction is going to be on these other 2 dimensions. And when I teach, I try to spend an equal time in each of these different dimensions. Let me give you an example of why that's important. So if I were to this is a new box that I built this morning. It's called the phenomenon box, but just to show you what I'm getting at. Does this show up, Britta? Can you see my phenomena box here? Okay, cool, awesome. So like this box, if I open it and then I load things into the phenomena box like this, I can close it, I can tap on it, and then those things go away. And then if I go back in and I tap on it again, then those things will come back again. So if we think this is not what we're doing in class, this is just like an analogy for what we're doing in class, but think of yourself almost like a magician. How would a magician run a trick? Like number 1, they would show the students the trick. They show them how I can make things disappear, make them come back again. But you would be a horrible magician if you started by explaining the trick before you did the trick. You would never say like, oh, let me take the back off. Like this part comes off here, and then there's a little connector in the back so I can snag it, and there's a hidden thing in here. Like that's a silly way to do magic, and it's also a silly way to teach science. We shouldn't start by telling the kids, this is all the science you're going to learn, and then get to do a little bit of discovery at the end. We should start with a phenomena, and then we should build towards a better understanding. So that's kind of just an analogy, I guess I would say, of how I think we should teach in 3 dimensions. Now, if that was what I was really trying to teach, it would have been a great way to do a little mini lesson on structure and function, and how do the structure and function contribute to the functioning of that box. And so I want to stop with the background on NGSS, and I want to give you all just a teacher warning. So we're about to just do some learning right now. So we're going to do some learning together. From this point forward, it's illegal to Google things. Can I get a pledge? Like you're not going to Google the answer to anything that I show you. Thanks for raising your hand. And so we're going to start by just digging into a little phenomena. I wanted to try a phenomena that would be something that would be ubiquitous to all of us, no matter where we are. And when I went to South America, this is the first thing that hit me was the leafcutter ants, or the Atta species. So we're going to start with that as a phenomena. We could just use that as like, let's watch them walk around and where are those leaves going and what's going on with that. That'd be a really cool phenomena. But I want to push you a little bit. So the phenomena we're going to dig into is more of an adult type phenomena that we'll get into. And so let me just give you a quick background on the ants. The leafcutter ants, what they're doing with their leaves is they're taking them back to their nest, and they grow a fungus. And so underground, they have these massive catacombs where they have a fungus. They feed the little leaves to their fungus, and then they grow food that they eat. There's a massive queen. They've also have developed a caste system. And so within that, in a colony, you'll have one massive queen, and the queen is pictured up to the right. You'll also have these soldiers. You'll also have the ones that we normally see in the forest. They're called foragers, and then we'll see minims. Minims are just workers as well, but they're within the colony itself. And so there's cool things about this. They're all female. They're all sisters. Like there's really cool phenomena like throughout, but that's not the one that we're going to dig into right now. We're going to dig into one that's really puzzling science even to this day. And we're going to try to figure out a little bit of what's going on. So we're going to watch a quick video. I got to make sure I turn audio on for a second. So we're going to watch a video just to give you a little background on the ants. What I want you to do as we watch, oops, sorry, wrong one. As we watch this, what I want you to be doing is just looking for patterns. And so, oops, I got to go through this a second. So if you've got something to write some notes down, that'd be fine. It's going to be about 2 minutes. And so there might be some evidence that you could collect as we watch the video. I want to signal to everybody how I want you thinking as we watch the video. I want you to be looking for patterns. So in science, patterns is always where you begin. So a pattern is going to be what we notice or what we observe. If you were my students in class, I would go through the 5 different senses that we use, things like vision, things like hearing. Since we're not in the forest, we're just going to have to be satisfied for what we hear and also what we see. But we'll use this evidence in just a bit. So let's watch a video.
Your screen is still black.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Laura. That would be wonderful, Laura. Let's go here. And then hopefully this works. Does that show up, Laura?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we're looking for patterns. Thank you.
We were looking at some of the world's earliest and most competent farmers. These leafcutter ants make humans look like newbies. We've been farming for 12,000 years. Ants have been doing it for 60 million. We developed plows and shovels. Ants use their own bodies. Their mandibles are shears that cut through leaves with incredible efficiency. The ants drink the sap in the leaves for energy, but they don't eat them. Remember, they're farming here. They're using the leaves to grow something else. But first, they have to haul the gigantic leaf pieces away. This is no small matter. For a human, it would be like carrying more than 600 pounds between our teeth. Then, they clean the leaves. They crush them. Cut them into little pieces. Arrange them carefully in stacks. They even compost the leaves with a little of their own poop. They spread spores around like seeds. Over time, a fungus grows. And this highly nutritious fungus, that's what the ants are after. They feed it to the colony's offspring, millions of them. For humans, farming was the origin of our civilization. And it's the same for ants. They are fungus tycoons. Their colonies are true underground cities with a bottomless need for resources. Having this reliable source of food has given them the luxury to specialize. Leafcutter ants have the most complex division of labor of any ants. There are tiny worker ants and large worker ants, and enormous half-inch long soldiers that protect the colony. Like human farmers, their abundant food source has made leafcutter ants very, very successful. And this is where 2 civilizations, ant and human, collide.
Now, as you watch, anytime you see leafcutter ants, you're just blown away by the society and how it's organized and how they all have jobs. It's just like humans. And so what's puzzled scientists for a long time is not the mechanism of how that works, but the big thing that they're puzzled with now is this. How do they communicate? Like, how does a colony communicate? How do all the parts work together? And then the most important thing is, control. Who's in charge? Who's in control of a colony? And so that's what we're going to inquire into right now. We're going to try to ask some questions. We're going to come up with some models. We won't have great solutions today just because we're limited in time, but this would be a great start to a unit. It's really going to move towards more of a physical science unit, but I wanted to start with ecosystems as a hook. And so the first thing I would do, if let's just say you're my class, the first thing I would do is I would not have a discussion. There would be no like, let's talk about this, or what do you think is going on? Lots of times that's the worst thing you can do at the beginning. And so the reason why is just the loud kids in class, everybody just listens to them right away. So could you click on the Google form? It just showed up in the chat. So if you could take a second to find that. There's a little Google form there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start. Can I get a thumbs up if you got that to load? Did you guys find that one? Perfect. All right. So what I want to do is give you a little time to wonder. And so if you were to click on that, it should open up a Google form. And that Google form, let me share with you what it looks like. I'll just share a screen so you can see what we're aiming for. So on the Google form, what I have here is, this is called the driving question form. So we're gonna create a quick driving question board out of it. I have some photographs at the beginning. I want you to put your first name, last name here. I'll hide it on the form, so it'll be anonymous, but this is your first formative assessment. So it's an ability to see how good are you at asking scientific questions. And so if you could put your names, first name, last name. Then I want you to come up with 2 wonderings. What are 2 wonderings you have about leafcutter ants? And if we could answer your questions, it would better understand like how communication and control works with those ants. If you're familiar with cross-cutting concept, and I know a lot of you are, it'd be great in your questions if you could explicitly use the cross-cutting concepts. So if you're familiar with the word pattern, try to use that in your question. So what I want from everybody in here is give me 2 questions and then 1 explanation. That's your guess. Like, how do you think they communicate and who do you think's in control? So we could think of this as just a pre-assessment to figure out where everybody is. But could you take a couple minutes to give me 2 questions and then 1 explanation? After you do so and submit the form, there will be a link at the bottom, which will take you to everybody else's wonderings and everybody else's explanations. And so after you submit, you're not done. Start looking at everybody else's wonderings, and you're looking for stuff that might help you better understand the phenomena. So I'll be quiet. Good luck. Let's wonder and let's think. So we've got, I think, 70 or so far. So could the rest of you make sure you submit, let's say in the next minute? So take the next minute to make sure you submit. And then if you've submitted, start looking at the other responses. What you're looking for is, what's your favorite question? Like, what is your favorite, the question that you also are interested in? Sounds good. For me, this was really, really fun to watch your faces as you were wondering. I just kept looking through the gallery and looking at everybody when they're thinking about the ant and wondering. So the most important thing, I think, when you're just getting started with NGSS is finding a phenomena that's interesting and at the right level of your kids, and just giving them time to wonder and start asking questions. One thing I've found is, like, don't start with group work right at the beginning. Give them time to individually ask those questions. Forms like this work really well if you're doing some kind of a distance or a hybrid learning, but you could just write them on Post-its and write them up. But the key thing is, I hope you're seeing, let me kind of look through them again. So the reason you always start with questions is it doesn't require such a commitment. Like, kids don't feel like, am I right or wrong? You're just asking a question. And so you're just kind of sharing your wondering. And so there's fantastic questions up here. And so I would call these first two columns just wondering. They're just like, what are you thinking? And do you have anything that you're wondering about that you would share with other people? If I could give you all feedback, one thing you're seeing pop up is there are different colors coming up. And so when I set up this Google form, I set it up so it would conditionally format your questions based on the word choice that you were using. And so if we look at this one right here, this person says, does the hole pattern in the fungal structure follow any kind of a distribution? So this person's asking pattern type questions. So these ones are pattern type questions. These ones that are black, they're talking about chemicals. And so in NGSS, they're really concerned with the matter and how the matter is maybe moving around. What would be this one? This is a structure function question. They're explicitly using the structure and function. But if I were to look through this whole thing as a group, I would say we don't have near enough questions like this. We don't have enough system questions. So probably half of the questions should be system questions. So how are the parts of the system interacting, and how is information flowing through in the system itself? And so that's not a judgment. I'm just saying, to really understand this, we need to start asking system questions. And so the feedback I would give to you as a class is, every one of these questions is awesome. We just need to be more explicit in the language that we're using as we start to ask scientific questions, because a good scientific question has three things. Number one, it addresses the phenomena. Number two, it's empirically testable. And number three, you've specified what type of a question you're asking. So in NGSS, there are really three types of questions you can ask. You can ask system questions, pattern questions, cause and effect questions, and then you could also ask engineering questions. And I'm not getting enough from your questions class so that I would know what kind of questions you're asking. So your wondering's great, but we could work a little bit on our ability to ask questions, especially around these cross-cutting concepts. I hope you're hearing what I'm saying, like being really explicit with that language, and I would try to be that with students as well. And then I would say, hey, we don't have enough system questions. Let's all write 1 or 2 system questions. And that would allow us to, like, dig more deeply into how does this work and how does the whole thing communicate as a system. So if we're thinking about, like, the steps I'm going through, first we're asking questions. Next thing we would go to is, let's start to think of this as a system. So how does this system work together? And then how do we explain the system itself? And so if you were in my class, I would go to digging into this as the next step. Let's construct explanations. And so the first thing that I always start with is giving you time to wonder and capture all those wondering somewhere. So this board that we just created is a driving question board. It could be like a wonder wall, but we'll keep going back to that as we answer certain questions and it leads to other questions. Also, that third column in that form, those explanations, now I know what every one of you thinks so far. So I've captured, it's like a pre-assessment of what everybody is thinking. I saw 0 answers that were perfect. So like, let's be humble. There were 0 ones when I looked down column 3 that were perfect. So like, we're gonna have to work together to figure this out. And so the next step we would go towards is constructing explanations of what we think. And so we're gonna throw you into a breakout room in just a second. You're just gonna be there with random people. Step 1 when you go there is you want to communicate with them. So like, hey, I'm Heather, I'm from Mexico. Just quickly introduce yourself, and then you're just going to get to work. And so we're going to get to work on a set of, I've just got a bunch of Google Slides that we're going to be using to work on. So it'd be great if you could click on this document that just showed up in the chat. So there's a document there. I'll put it in again. So if you could click on that, it would be great. Let me make sure that is that working for you guys? Thumbs up. Okay, perfect. All right. So now that you've got that loaded, you want to make sure you have that before you go to the breakout rooms. Can you just not look at it and then watch the screen, and I'll talk you through how we're going to use it. And then you'll go into breakouts and you use it in a second. And so let me show you what's on that link that I put there, and I'll continue putting there. So this is my website. It's the Wonder of Science. And so we're about to go into some breakouts. And so since we're all around the world, we're just going to use Google Slides to do our work together. And so you'll be thrown into a breakout, and you're going to be in a breakout 1 through 50. And so let's say I end up in a breakout group and I'm like group 23. I'm going to click on the Google Slides that are right here, just so we don't overwhelm them. Once you go in, we're going to look at putting together our thinking around systems. And so we're always going to practice before we go back to the ants. And so let me give you an example of how we would do that. I've got a quick example of this. And so this is a music box that I ordered. So a music box where I turn the handle on this side, and when I turn the handle, the music goes through it and it plays the song. And so this we're going to think of as a system right now. So when I click on it, it's going to play some music. This is the one I'm working right now. So I'm just doing this. You won't do this one. You're going to do a different one when you're with your breakout group. But let me just work this so you know exactly how I want you to work when you go into the groups. So the first thing you should do is you should figure out how does this system, what are the major parts of the system? And so in this do-it-yourself music box, the first thing I always do is write down all the things that I can see. And so the things on the left side, you can just drag out. So the first thing that I see is the paper that goes through. The next thing I see is a handle. So all you do when you're working on systems is you identify all the things you can see. In systems, we call these components. What would be another thing that I see? So the paper goes through, and then I eventually will open it up here. And so let's see. Oh, there's gears in there. And so that would be another thing that I would put in here. I would put gears in. So the first thing I do is put in all the things that I can see. Those are called components in a system. And then we start writing down how do they interact. So I saw a lot of you in your explanations, you said the queen was a big part of the system. So that would just be one of these boxes. Then the next thing you would do is say, what is the relationship between those components? So I could say, maybe the paper goes through the gears. So the paper is dragged through the gears, and then maybe the handle is moving the gears. And so what I'm doing is just dragging components from the left side up so you can see it. You can even define what those relationships are. So you could say the handles provide energy for the gears. And so this is a system model, we would call it. It's just showing the components of the system and then how are all those components together. And so what you're going to do in the breakouts is you're going to start by clicking on your group number. So let's say I'm group 1. You would click on that and you're going to start with a simple one. I've got a little simple marble run that's set up. And so what I want you to do is look at the marble run and put together a system model. And this has to be collaborative for you as a group. You should in Zoom be able to share your screen. So if you just want to have one person share their screen and then capture the ideas of the group. So you're going to put together a system model for the marble run, but then when you're done, then you're going to put a system model together for how you think the colony operates. So how do you think information flows or control works in there? And so once you're done with that, we'll get about 10 minutes in there or a little bit less. Then we'll come back and then I'll show you how we would eventually test those models. So hopefully you've clicked on that link. I'll put it in one more time to the chat. That's going to be where all your breakout groups are. You're going to go have some fun with people for about 8 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll figure out how close are we to the right answer. Laura, if you don't mind, that'd be great. There should be an invitation that just popped up.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just finding our slides. Did everyone get the slides?
No.
I just dropped our set in the chat. And I can share screen. Okay, so he just did we're doing the leaf cutter ants. No, we're breakout group 13. So ours is marble run. So you have to watch this clip. I guess this one doesn't move. What schools are y'all from?
I teach at San Roberto in Monterrey.
Oh, cool.
I teach at Mazapan School in Honduras.
Hi there. I teach at Happy Days Freedom in Honduras as well.
I'm at Columbus School in Medellin, Colombia.
Hi, everyone. I'm at elementary. I'm in Torreon, Mexico, Colegio Americano.
Thank you all for coming. I hope it's been fun so far. Okay, you all want to shout out some components of the marble run and I can drag them over, or if you're on, it's slide 10 if y'all want to get involved in that too.
Well, definitely marbles.
Definitely not going to choose that small of a box again. Forget it. Okay, got marbles.
So the cups that contain the marble when they fall?
Gonna make this prettier.
What's that called where the marbles are going around on?
To me, it looks like a wooden track.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
I think I'm just going to use all big boxes from now on. This kind of seems like, I don't know if it's the same as the track, but like a ramp, like a little entry ramp or something.
And there's definitely a ramp on the bottom too.
Mm-hmm. Like Like an elevated entry ramp, and then what's like an exit ramp?
Yeah.
Okay. What do we think about relationships?
Well, the elevated entry ramp makes the marbles move because it's at an angle of some sort, or I can't tell if that's at the angle or if like the wooden track is like a cone shape.
It's
It
both.
shows a it shows
It's
a
both?
side
Okay.
angle that's coming up. It seems like it's
Yeah,
like a
it's
downward spiral. There it is.
Okay.
Like a cone spiral. So like you said, elevated entry ramp to marbles.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can make pretty arrows.
Would it be the other way though? Like the marbles on the elevated entry ramp, which then go to
Marbles on elevated entry ramp.
which then goes to the wooden track cone spiral.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The elevated exit ramp to the cups.
That one's not too complex of a system.
So there's a spiral movement into the center of that takes them to the lower ramp.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling with my arrows here. Cardo, was that you? Could you say that again?
Well, I noticed that there's the spiral takes all the marbles to the center circle and then they fall to the lower ramp.
Okay, there's like a intermediate step we skipped, which is like a circle.
Spiral or circle in the middle of a spiral.
And then that goes to the ramp. He didn't model relationship, but I think maybe the speed, I don't know if this would go in a system. It just seems like the speed is related to the like grade of inclination.
I agree.
We have seconds to go.
Oh, bye.
So welcome back to here. I know you didn't have enough time, obviously, but I think it's always good, I think as Britta said, to become empathetic for what it's like to be a student during a time of all this learning that they're doing and trying to communicate with people in breakout rooms like that. So I think what I've found with teaching these practices, what I was really trying to do was a mini lesson on systems. How do we start to define what a system is? What are the parts of the system and how are the parts connected? I found before you try to throw kids into a complex phenomena like how do they communicate in a colony of leafcutter ants, give them a concrete example like the marble run as a first one. Let's see if we can say what are the parts of a marble run and where do the marbles go, and then tracing that. And then once we can trace a concrete example, then we can move towards those marbles now become bits of information. And how does that information flow and where does it move and how does the system connect like that? And so for me, I'm always like mini lessons that are concrete around these practices and cross-cutting concepts are always helpful before we go to the phenomena. A lot of groups I just because of time didn't get to make it to the actual looking at the phenomena of the ants. And so I put my wife on the spot a little bit and said to Laura, like, how do you think they communicate in the ants? And she put together this one. It looks like the queen communicates to the foragers, communicates to the soldiers, and then communicates to those that do the forage, at least those who need food. So I would call like Laura's system model a top-down kind of a system where the queen is in charge. As a scientist, then how do we test that? If that's the model, then how do we test it? It's really easy. You just take the queen out. And so if we take the queen out, what would we start to see? We'd start to see that the foragers wouldn't know what to do and wouldn't know where to go. And same thing with the soldiers. And so really in science, that's what we try to do. Is in science, we develop models and then we test those models over time. What's interesting about leafcutter ants and any ants writ large, I'm going to kill the wonder. I hope you're okay with that, but I only have 30 seconds left. They don't have a top-down hierarchy. They each just follow a simple set of rules. So there's simulations we can use to do that. This is just a quick simulation of ants' behavior. What they do is they just randomly run around. And then once they get food, they go back to where they were at the beginning. So that's their model, run around randomly. And then when you find food, go back to the colony. Now, what's happened over time is they've started to lay chemicals down. So let me just show you what that looks like. If you lay chemicals down on your way back, then other ants will pick up on those chemicals, those pheromones, and so they can be more efficient at what they're doing. But the key thing with ants and anything like complex systems like that is each part just has to follow a couple of rules, and then the whole thing works over time. And so I wanted to use this, Britta, I'm coming back to you in just a second. I want to use this as a bridge to the partnership. So we've got a complex system. It's made of right now hundreds of people. And so how do we get a partnership like this to work? You just do your job. What is your job? Like, go to the breakout room, engage with people, reply to an email, go to the workshop, like be an ant. Just think about an ant when it comes to this for just a bit. And what simple things can you do to make the whole partnership like work effectively? And so I think that's just a starting point. Britta, I will let you take over. I know. Oh, actually, I think we might be pushing them to breakout. Sorry, Britta. I want to make sure that we're on the timeline. Is that right, Britta?
Yep. Now we're going to join the breakout room if we're leaders and admin, and then teachers can stay in here with you.
Gotcha. So to kind of go
I think
ahead.
we were teachers push into a room too.
Okay.
There'll be two choices.
Gotcha. So we're all going to get pop-ups right now for new breakout rooms. And I think you can choose. You can either choose to go with the leaders or go with the teachers. I'm going to be with John Mark, and we're going to be with the teachers. And then I think Britta, you and Heather might be with the leaders. Is that right? Awesome. And if you don't get a pop-up or you're not updated with Zoom, Laura will stay here and move you where you want to go. So just be patient. Sound good? All righty.
Do you see that, Paul?